Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I commend both of you. The Army at this point in its history needs strong leadership, and I view in both of you that potential that you've given it, are giving it, and will continue to give it. I want to turn to that very interesting statement that you look into the future, General Casey, and you see persistent conflict. Regrettably, that may well be the state of the world. But I also wish to draw your attention to the fact that we are focusing here today and the coming budgets on the Army and meeting the 4 imperatives that you listed, General Casey. But bear in mind that that persistent conflict is across a spectrum of challenges that really require this country to maintain a very strong Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Army. So throughout history, there's always been I think, a strong competition between the military departments for resources. I was privileged to serve in the building many years in the Navy Secretariat. I saw it firsthand. I've seen it here these many years that I've been privileged to serve on this committee. That will continue. But at this point in time, I think the pendulum has to swing somewhat towards the Army to meet your 4 imperatives. But we cannot take our eye off that persistent conflict and the diversity and the challenge that the overall armed forces may meet. And if I could make one observation after the privilege of being in this body for so many years and associated with the military, future presidents, future Congresses are going to exercise within their respective constitutional powers very, very firm oversight and direction on future military operations. This one has taught us many lessons, not only Iraq, but the continuing situation in Afghanistan. And as a consequence, as we do that, we've got to keep a balanced force structure as envisioned by Goldwater-Nichols, the jointness that has made, I think, our armed forces stronger and more effective today. So I turn to first question. You said you need our help. There's a disposition in the Congress to give that help. But is that help only in the form of money, or do you wish to have some legislation to enable you to achieve the 4 imperatives that you've listed?
Senator, it's primarily in the form of money. However, I will tell you, I mentioned the fact that the National Guard and Reserve are executing operational missions that they weren't originally designed for. And we are working within the department here to reshape some of the legislation and policies that were put in place in the 50s for a different kind of Guard and Reserve. And we've changed the paradigm on our reserve component forces, and I think we need to level with them, tell it what it is, and to do that, I think it's ultimately going to require some legislation to change that. So I'd like to work with you on that in the coming months.
Will that be forthcoming in the present budget cycle for 09?
I think it'll probably be 10. I don't think we're at a point to get it into 09 just yet.
I want to talk broadly about another issue. It's quite interesting. There's an excellent article in my judgment in today's Washington Post on the military perspective of the situation in Iraq and how the surge operations have achieved the result that the President laid down. That is a greater security. But there has not been, and yesterday many of us attended briefings with the Secretary of State and Defense and confirmed we have not received that degree of political reconciliation from top down, as distinguished from that from bottom up. And a number of officers have spoken out, I think, very courageously on this, but nevertheless anonymously. And that brings me to the following. We're all familiar with General Sanchez's comments on October the 12th, when he spoke about the war, and he said America is living in a nightmare with no end in sight. Now, I fully respect the right of a retired officer to make those comments hopefully within the bounds, never to inflict injury or greater risk to the forces fighting. But I come down to my specific question. But in that same forum, he was asked why he did not bring up his concerns about the conduct of the war was he on active duty. And he responded, quote, "The last thing you want is for currently serving officers to stand up to political leadership," end quote. Reading in that article today, I think those officers that were quoted were within the confines, but what is your direction, General Casey, to your officer corps today about their responsibility to speak up while in uniform and address issues which they see, particularly those on the front lines of the combat situations, see situations like the deterioration of the ability of that Iraqi government to come forward and respond to the improved security arrangements which have been fought hard, death and wounds, and all sorts of sacrifice to achieve it?
Senator, what I tell my generals is they're obliged to ask the hard questions and to speak the hard truths. And they owe it to the country and they owe it to their soldiers to ensure the political leaders hear their unvarnished views on hard issues. I tried to do that the whole time I was in Iraq, and I encourage everybody to do the same.